good night, everybody. The title tonight is Actions Speak Louder Than Words, Empathy versus Gains. And by gains, I mean power and money. Are we sacrificing our employees and our customers for gains? I have brought on a guest, and his name is W. Kevin Ward, and he is from Georgia, USA. He is known as a wise counselor, a people builder, a wisdom seeker. He believes strongly in servant leadership, and I believe that he can lend a lot to the wise. Why is it so hard for an organization to change? Why is it that money seems to be at the priority? Of course, that is important, but then, of course, we all know in an organization, you need to create an alignment. You have to give priority to the human beings who ensure that you're able to make your dollars and cents on a daily basis. So, by saying that, I'm going to now bring on Kevin Ward to our talk. So, let me connect. There you are, Kevin.
I still don't know what I did, but hey, if it's working, let's not bother it. How about that?
Yes, we have to be very gentle with it. Yes. How are you?
One day
How are
I'll
you?
try to understand what I did.
Oh, well, I said, okay, you know what? The best thing to do is disconnect and reconnect. Usually that works with mostly everything.
Well, I'll have to write some notes down and remember what I did.
Oh boy. I would really love if you could introduce yourself to our audience. Tell them something about you. I mean, there's so much I found. I know you're very humble, but I really like you to share something with our audience.
Okay, I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. Kind of to give, I guess, a nutshell version. I am a teacher. I have been a business operator, currently operating my own business, doing consulting, teaching, training, and coaching. I speak. I'm happy to speak to groups. In fact, it's kind of ironic that I find myself on camera as much as I do now, because the first time on LinkedIn I tried to do a video, it took me 2 months to get my courage up.
I know.
My priority, my vision, okay, is I want to see people find their potential. That is my ultimate goal in most everything I do. And one of the things that I do currently to really try to make that happen is through my Wisdom Seeker program. And we do a live stream every Monday and at 8 o'clock Eastern. So anyone want to join us on LinkedIn, YouTube, or Facebook. And I have recently adopted a new hashtag, my second one. My first one is hashtag WKW People Builder. And my new one is hashtag Wise Counselor, because I seem to have drawn that as a moniker from people I know. So the other part of what I do is try to help people find wisdom, because I think culturally we're missing it.
Oh yes, very much so. You believe strongly in a servant leader. Why? Why is that?
Because I'm of the opinion, and am not necessarily popular with the opinion, but that you cannot truly be a leader without being a servant leader. Because a leader that isn't a servant leader is really a manager, a boss, and in bad cases, a dictator or some kind of authoritarian person. And the key difference between a leader and a servant leader is humility, recognizing that really what we are, who we are, in light of the big picture. The older I get, the more I realize that I'm a tiny, tiny speck in a big, big world, and so it changes the approach, changes the mindset, everything.
Our world is changing so drastically. Some of it is so unrecognizable to me. Some of I mean, I am a very spiritual person, but you know that there are things to come and there are things that have happened. But then what's most puzzling to me is the human behavior, the human reaction. What can you share about what has been the most telling within organizations that are not able to change, that are not able to realize the importance of empathy and having servant leadership?
Well, it's an interesting component. Okay, part of it, I'm a baby boomer. Okay, and our generation has set the tone of, the philosophy, and even the styles of how an organization is run. That is the primary driver. And bear in mind, this goes back to 60s, even 50s, philosophical and design components as to how an organization functioned, especially a business organization. And it's still in place. Okay, that's part of the problem. That has never shifted. And for my generation and the ones, Generation X following on, we were still accustomed to businesses running under a primary concept of authority. It's summarized when in business, when the boss said something, generally, I mean, you might disagree a little bit, but generally the boss said, well, because I said so, and we were done talking. And you just went on about it because our view of our culture was very different. Okay, our values as a culture was very different. Our view of authority was very different. And as a result, management style and how to operate as an organization was very different. And because we were driven by, we had a job, we liked the security of it, especially if we had some benefits, and one day we would like to retire from that company. And that's still present in a lot of the organizational mindset. And what's happened is that culture has shifted. Okay, I speak on workforce to industry and company groups, and it was preparing for one of those that I came across a concept that helped to get it gelled in my head, because right now we got 6 generations in the workforce, and the disparate nature between the baby boomers, which is me, and, my generation, and the Gen Zs who are now entering the workforce, is remarkable. And prior generations, we had our challenges, but there was a common set of core cultural components that we accepted. That has changed. And it started shifting from the boomer generation to the X generation, and it's continued shifting with each generation to a point that you look at a Gen Z generational person, young person, authority to them is, in a lot of ways, is non-existent. It's still imposed in some ways because of rules and those things, but conceptually, authority is invalid. Okay, so when we try to run a business and organization based on authority, there's a big disconnect. And again, my generation, Generation X, are still influencing organizational structure and management mindset and those things, and that shift still hasn't occurred. because
Exactly.
it's so ingrained, and especially in big companies, because that's how they got started, and they don't know. First of all, I'm not sure they even understand they need to shift. Second of all, if they happen to understand they need to shift, they don't know how to go about it.
Correct. That I think that's one of the most critical things, the not knowing how to. In fact, you have to recognize something to realize, okay, there is a serious problem, and as you said, generational problems, because when you talk about tolerance level now, before, persons were eager to join organizations just for the whole excitement of proving that they are worthy, that they are coming to make a change and to help build the company. Now you have, similar to what has occurred because of the pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
a very high, what, in the 70 percentile, as it has been reported. Workers have decided to quit their jobs for remote work, or for preference of remote work. That means they're not willing to be subjected to be coming to work 8 to 4, 8, 5, or whatever the time may be, sit in an office, be micromanaged. I'm just thinking of the things that contribute to that burnout. And we spoke slightly about the subject of fatigue, which is part and parcel of burnout. So
Right.
the mindsets now are so different.
Mm-hmm.
What can you share about that? What is your thinking about that news, though, about the 70+% say that they quit
I'm
their jobs?
right. Not especially surprised, okay, because I've been watching this, and I've got an article in my head that I'm going to got to get out in print. But I've watched some different workforce dynamics that are having an effect, and the pandemic and the work from home, forced to work from home concept has become, I think, a defining factor. We have the two things that have been working along that have impacted the workforce, and what we're talking about, the struggle with empathy and so on, is education system, and it's disconnected in a big way from what the business world needs, massively so. Second thing I was speaking about earlier is the cultural approach, or lack of it, in business, as far as managing, leading, whatever term you want to use. That is a conflict. And now we're with the pandemic, we've got people that were already feeling restricted by the circumstance, by their work circumstances. They weren't ready to go out and be an entrepreneur, because the tradition is you get a job, you stay at it, and try to get some security by a regular paycheck. And what's happened is, now with the pandemic, that's been challenged. And so people are going, why am I, first of all, where did 9 to 5 come from? Okay. Second of all, where did reporting to the office come from? And so how we culturally respond to the remote work, what my business partner and I talked about is, we got to think in terms of strategic flexibility, and organizations don't know what to do with that, because under your traditional philosophical and structural design of management, accountability is based in watching and seeing and interacting with what people are doing real time in physical space. And one of the big objections to the remote work concept is, and if you talk to companies, they'll tell you they've decided, many of them, that when people work from home, they're less productive. Okay, sometimes true, sometimes not. But the mindset, the philosophy of management says that if I can't see you and hold you accountable in person, you're not going to be as productive. That is true of some people, but in many cases, done correctly, have to throw in that caveat.
Yes.
It can actually be not only as equally productive, but more productive for people. But we're culturally, business-wise, wrestling with it, and we haven't come to good terms with it. And my opinion, the other two things and this one, if we go the wrong direction, we're going to see what I call, there was a movie called Perfect Storm. Don't know if you ever saw that one.
Yes, I have.
The boat and, okay.
Yes.
What I'm visualizing and thinking is we're getting to a point that we may see this perfect storm of those three things come together, and it's going to impact major businesses. Gary Vee, I know most people know Gary Vee. Probably a year ago, Gary Vee started talking about major disruption with Fortune 500 companies. When he first said that, I kind of went, not sure I can go along with it. But as it's progressed along, I believe he is on target, or could be on target, depending on how we approach this. Because what I'm watching is a workforce deterioration, because the culture, that philosophy of management hasn't changed. Okay, how the system is preparing young people for theoretically for work is not what's happening. And now the struggle over, wow, working from home is pretty good. And there are different reasons. You know, some people like myself in Atlanta, commuting is torture. And working from home avoids that and is very pleasant. So again, there's a lot of history that's factoring in, and the major companies are not agile enough to start the change, and they are late coming to it. And the way they've approached it, unfortunately, rather than taking the human more into account, it has actually become more dehumanized. The way we see that is how we approach technology. Technology is great, especially once you get the camera working and things. But it's not the solution, or it's not a simple solution like we want to treat it. We think people are like computers, and the analogy works on some level. But computers, you can get software and plug and play. Okay, pop it in, opens up, do a couple of things, and it's off and running. And what we've done is assumed, well, if it works in the computer, we don't have to worry about the human element. Okay, and with the disparity in the generations right now, how they react to that, rather than it becoming a good thing for everybody, it's a mixed bag, and companies, organizations don't know what to do with it. So I hope I'm not getting too nerdy.
All of this is so relevant. I mean, we live in different parts of the world, but it is so amazing to me, the similarities of the experiences we both have. Of course, the Caribbean is built on slave plantation kind of structures and thinking that have not yet removed itself from the ways in which businesses are run, especially when you make distinctions between family-owned businesses or that kind of structure. And for the most part, if something is okay with you, comfortable with you, you're not going to make any efforts to change it unless if something drastically happens. Now, the gains aspect is supposed to make you realize that change is necessary or is inevitable. How have you been able to open the minds of leaders so that it is not all about the money? It is not all about the bottom line, because and I think that phrase, the bottom line, has been used so often, that eventually the bottom line flourishes when people's needs are met, when employees are happy, and when customers are equally happy. So what can you share there? I know I have said a lot, but
it's a factor is the unawareness of the cultural shift. Okay, most of your primary decision makers are still baby boomers and Generation Xers. Okay, and a lot of my generation and that generation still do not understand the cultural shift that that has occurred. They know it's happened. They don't understand it. And I know they know it's happened because they complain about it a lot. Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, if they would and back in the day, and that mindset is ineffective. Now, there's plenty of, if you will, blame to go around, because the younger generations are pointing at the older generation, say, well, y'all are just out of touch and you have no clue and we just ignore you. And that's not a good approach either. What I've tried to help organizations get a hold of is, the younger generations want to say, well, I don't care about money. That's kind of what is expressed. Mm-hmm. The reality is they do, because nobody has stepped up and said, hey, I'll work for free. If it's a good cause, a good reason, I'll work for free. That doesn't happen. On the other side, we've got to have a mindset shift with the older generation that the focus cannot be any longer just on bottom line. All your management finance courses say you got to watch the bottom line. Okay, mm-hmm. There's truth there, but you can't. If your focus is on the bottom line now, current situation, it's going to suffer because you are not considering your people. And what we're seeing, the great resignation, and people that focus on the bottom line to the detriment of the people are getting to a point they're going to say, I'm done. I'll figure out something else to do. And that's what we're seeing happen. The key, though, is both groups have to understand we still have to have a bottom line. Because if the company's not profitable, nobody gets paid. Mm-hmm. And we don't have to have either or. Okay. The key, and this is something that I talk about, my business partner and I talk about all the time, is balance. Yeah. And again, principles that I think about that are so key is understanding what we're, for example, balance. I read a very impactful book. I'm going to date myself here. This goes back to the 70s, and it was about balance. And most people still think of balance as finding a middle position and maintaining it. Okay, we think of that way politically. We think of that way socially. Work-life balance and all that. This reading this book, and I mean, it was a little. Most people look at that and go, "That's insignificant." But the concept is balance is we have to learn is there are two opposing positive characteristics. We don't throw one away to focus on the other. If we do, it has one type of result. If we keep this one and throw this one away, we have a different negative result. If we keep both of them, hold tight, and then be able to shift, okay, in this circumstance, got to be a little more this way. Or in this circumstance, I got to be a little more this way. That's where we find balance. And the big example when we talk empathy. Some people want to make empathy about giving everybody a hug and talking nice and smile.
Yes.
Nothing wrong with it. But if that's all you do, at some point, there's going to be a problem because things will derail. There'll be conflict. There will be hurt and so on. The very thing we're trying to avoid with empathy will be shot. Okay. On the other hand, if we all we do is this hard line everything, okay, there will be a different result. So my favorite, and I make no secret that a lot of my insight comes from the Bible. Okay. And the Bible says that we are to do two things. We're supposed to speak the truth. Okay. I have to, if I care about you or whoever, and I see something that's wrong, and especially if it's harmful to you, and I don't say something, I don't care. Okay. But we have gotten to a point we cannot speak truth to each other because we don't want to offend anybody. Okay. So that's speaking, that's love. Okay. I'm going to give you a hug. I'm going to encourage you. That's love. That's compassion. I get that. Okay. The other side, my generation leans toward the other side of da 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 da. Okay. And the key is in a given situation, and this is where servant leadership comes in, is by being a servant leader, you are not a factor in it. Your job is to help find how to help others resolve or avoid circumstances that create their problems. And if it's an individual, sometimes you need to give them a hug. And I know now that sometimes gets taken wrong, but the concept is show compassion, whatever that looks like. Okay, but that same person in another time and situation, if we really care about them, they need to be told, and I give people permission around me to look at me and say, you realize that's pretty stupid, don't you? And have that candor, and that's the balance. That same person may come up and say, man, you're doing great, really think you're amazing, you know, all of the warm, compassionate pieces of empathy. Other times they may look at me and say, you're really not going to be stupid like that, are you? And the ability to, that's where we get our balance. In relationships that I have with people, if they are close relationships, one time I may shake them on their hand and pat them on the back and even give them a hug. But other times I look at them and go, no, you're not. If you do that, it's going to be really stupid and it's not going to be a good result. And either way, they know that I care about them. And that's because I come at it as a servant leader. They know regardless of whether it's the handshake or the figurative slap upside the head, it's all born out of care.
Yes. That brought up something. I have been doing some research to identify the visible signs that businesses are I guess, display non-empathetic behavior. So, of course, you know, in social media, depending on how you structure your website, how you structure your app, not providing the opportunity for feedback
Mm-hmm.
was glaring to me. One of the going factors for you to know whether somebody really loves and appreciates your product or service, or whether you want to know whether they do not like your product or service at all, is to provide a portal or an avenue by which they can express that. And I did some research and I visited a number of websites, and I didn't hardly found that opportunity for a customer to do that. And that clearly showed me that there's clearly, maybe I would say it in two ways. Maybe it's too mammoth of a task to deal with. We're talking about thousands and thousands of people saying what they like, what they dislike. Okay. The visible reflection so that everybody will see, maybe a concern, the fright of it being seen by others, not having the capacity to deal with it, to handle it, because I could say sometimes in our jurisdiction, we have a lot of subsidiaries here, but the head offices are not here.
Mm-hmm.
So there's only so much that leaders here have authority to do or deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to go the path of a long, maybe, process to even get it in, far less considered, far less approved, and then it has to be justifiable, because sometimes, I know in some cases, certain subsidiaries are deemed cash cows. So not changing anything works to the betterment. But at the same time, you're probably killing that cow.
A bite at a time. Yes.
But exactly. So I really want about that feedback, the importance of feedback. Can you just express your views on that?
Yes. Feedback is critical. Okay. Again, current management philosophy, again, extreme. Okay. Understand where it came from. Okay. For my generation, first of all, a common expression about children. Children are to be seen, not heard. Okay. That translates in some fashions. An employee, in some ways, is to be seen, not heard. Okay. And the mindset is still ingrained on some level. And you mentioned feedback digitally. Right? Part of the problem is that we have forgotten that I'm a bit of an anomaly for my generation, in that I have adapted and adopted to technology. I am pretty good at it, in spite of what happened earlier.
No, don't worry about that.
But so the idea of getting feedback through technology, that's not even valid. Plus, it could be abused. There's a lot of distrust in the whole concept, and it's not an invalid thought, but to take it and negate the whole concept is the problem. You have people that are in my generation, Generation X, that if you were to ask them and they got real honest, technology would go away completely.
Yeah.
Okay. And that mindset's still there. Also, again, feedback is not something that in that model that's critical. Okay. The person in charge is the authority. They don't need your feedback. They are, and part of it comes from an extreme degree of responsibility. Okay? If I've got to be that responsible, I got to control it. And I understand the comfort in that and the preference, but it's not a good model. And one of the things that I've had to understand as I have grown and gotten older is how little I truly can control. And when I let
Yeah.
go of that, then I shift from managing, okay, to trying to influence it. Now I am leading it, right? And my big mantra, and any organization that ever gets this concept has a fighting chance of shifting and being able to, as we were talking about, become an empathetic culture without throwing away their profitability. And that is, we've got to shift from being a manager of everything, which is my generation, Generation X, which is the design foundation of a lot of the big businesses. Remember that, is that manage everything and everybody. That's the way it's designed, and the structures are built in that fashion. But what I have had to learn and I've had to shift, and this is where servant leadership factors in, is we still have to manage things. If we don't know how much money we're spending on something or whatever, and we lose complete sight of that, the likelihood we will survive is very small as a business. Okay? So we got to do that. But what we've got to shift is get very good at managing things, but we've got to shift to leading people. Okay? Managing things is based in control. Leading people is based in influence. Two different approaches. And what I watch in organizations is they give lip service to a lot of things, but they still have not acknowledged the shift to go from, when it comes to people, go from using authority to using influence. And that's the shift that has to occur. If it doesn't, their ultimate result is that they will alienate their workforce and nobody else will want to come to work for them because, by the way, they're now, if you're a bad company, word gets out. People know, and they're going to say, "Meh, sorry." So that's the picture I try to help businesses and organizations understand. I know right now a lot of organizations are coming and saying, we can't keep our people. Why? And the reason is that we've got a lot of mid-level or field leadership out there that are still trying to control everything and everybody. And they do not know how to control things and lead people. They can't.
Correct.
And then the other extreme, because I put a lot of blame on my generation. Problem we've got with the younger generations is they do not know how to manage things. They've not been challenged to manage things. And what's going to happen is, as my generation and the Generation X, as we start moving out, what's going to happen is you're going to have people come into leadership or management roles, and they're going to go the other extreme, and that is, well, oh, don't worry about keeping up with the numbers. Let's don't worry about that. Let's all focus on leading people. And the end result there is, yeah, you won't have to worry about bottom line because there will be no bottom line. The key is having both.
I agree with you totally. Let me just share a little something. The ethos in the hierarchy of business environment, one of the things that happens is that you have a generational battle. So the ways of the older are passed on to the younger. and it's expected that you're going to carry on the way things have been done before. As much as, and I do agree with you, but I think that depends on the business model or the type of business. It will remain that way. And then you have the other businesses where they may be foreign persons coming in, or new thinkers, creating a business that seems to be more along the lines of more innovative, real needs and problem solving, would then shift, well, hoping that they can at least create that balance between things and people.
Yeah.
So I really, I know it's a very difficult balancing act for a lot of businesses. But I do believe that there could be a baseline shift starting from a place. What would you propose could be a place to start? Because it is also believed by some that despite the type of leadership you have, even within certain functional zones within a company, there could be shift and transition happening in those nodes. Do you think that that's a good approach to have?
You know, when we have a problem, there's a principle. You always try to get back to the basics.
Yeah.
Okay. The challenge is that, and in my mind, from a leadership organizational standpoint, the basics come back to three things:
Mm-hmm.
vision,
Mm-hmm.
mission, and values.
Mm-hmm.
If you're ever in a situation where things are out of line, you should have a strong vision, a strategic mission, and essential values that you can come back to measure from. The problem is some of the older organizations really didn't have that because it wasn't necessary, because people were compliant. People got along because it was a part of the culture and necessary. Mm-hmm. Okay. And what's happening now is their compass is broken.
Yeah.
Okay. The other thing we see is that I see a lot of organizations now, these startup organizations, that never had vision, mission, and values. They had a passion to do something, and they've driven it forward, and that will last for a time. But eventually, without that essential in place, they're going to crumble based on a different set of issues. And so, again, I look at the Bible for wisdom, and there is a verse that says, without vision, people perish. And that's not about dying, because we all die, okay, regardless of vision. It's talking about people giving up hope and quit trying and so on. And there are examples that demonstrate how vision is meant to be, and vision becomes the gathering place for the people involved in the organization. Unfortunately, right now, when people look, job seekers, most of them, even the ones that say money aren't important, what's one of the first questions they want to know? How much am I going to get paid? Okay. And so when we are still driven in that fashion, not by a common goal to accomplish, a common goal to do something, when we lose sight of that, it all breaks down. For example, the part of the reason that this business structure worked in my generation was because The shared vision was being a good employee, do the good job, retire with a pension.
Mm-hmm.
That was a common vision. That is not a shared common vision. It worked in my generation, but it still wasn't ideal. Okay, because when we talk about leadership and celebrate people that really do well, we spend a lot of time celebrating coaches and people like that, because they understood about leadership rather than management. And so any organization, if they really want to start evaluating what is their vision and do your people share it. If they don't share your vision, you're always going to be, as to use some of the old sayings, you're going to be herding cats or pushing a wet noodle up the hill. You're going to be frustrated. Micromanaging. Reason people micromanage, they're not headed in the same direction. And so you're constant, rather than you both moving this way towards a common vision, a shared vision, doesn't mean that everybody has to be lock, stock, and every word and it's a common vision for a purpose. And if you do that, both people are moving in the same direction. They may approach it a little different, from a little different angle, different talent, whatever. That's okay, as long as you share this is where we're going. Now, mission and vision, by the way, is not a goal. A lot of companies have great, big goals. I don't know if you're familiar with the term BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal. That was a very popular thing for a while. Nothing wrong with goals and big goals, but that's still not a vision. Again, I've wrestled with vision a long time, and finally I've come to understand my own vision, and it is to help people reach their potential. Can I do it alone? No. Will it happen in my lifetime? Probably not, but it is a direction I go, so that if someone's going to join me in that, that's got to be at least an element.
I want to touch on this very last subject before you do your close off. Doing it alone. I think that's another thing that adds fuel to the fire when you're unable to balance. The fact that there's certain people, I mean, there are various scenarios, but they may have moved up the ladder, and ended up in leadership and management, and they feel, okay, I have reached and I know how to do things, and I'm in charge, and nobody can touch me, and I'm indispensable. And they want to do it alone, but it's still not realized that you still need to be part of the team. And I think that could also be one of the reasons why there's somewhat of an imbalance. That staff are supposed to do as I say. There's no feedback that is supposed to come my way, and I will make the decisions no matter what. Even if I am not the time zone, I am very far from understanding what technology is, what innovation is, what crypto is, what Bitcoin is, how to use Instagram, that kind of thing, how to build a website, what are the intricacies. Yet still, I want to make the decision alone. What would you say to that thought? One of your last thoughts.
Again, I go back to vision. Somebody like that, I think, has too small a vision. If your vision allows you to think you can do it alone, it's not a vision. It may be a great goal, but it's not a vision. See, and again, servant leadership, part of the reason that I'm a servant leader, I know I can't do it alone. And that causes me, by its very nature, to have to be humble. I have to ask for help. I have to depend on other people. And when we don't do that, we think we can do it alone. We don't have vision.
Correct. Excellent closing. I have to watch the time. We have to be considerate. Yes. Ooh, we over our, well, I know we started a little later, but I
Yep.
am very, very thankful, Kevin, to you. You
Sure.
left us with some wonderful nuggets. I love the openness. I love the frankness of the contribution. Would you like to end with any last words to on the subject or to our audience?
Be willing to learn and grow and change.
Yes.
Okay. Servant leadership is not a style of leadership, it's a lifestyle. One
Right.
other thing, we want to separate business and life. Business is not equal standing with life. It's a subset.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Our vision should be about our life. Our vision related to business should be a subset. And when we
Wow.
begin to understand that, makes a big difference.
On
Sure.
that note, I would like to say thank you so much. Thank you, Kevin.
You're
Thank you
very
for
welcome.
good night, everybody. Thank you for joining. Until next Thursday. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.